Welcome back to the Root and Rise podcast. I'm your host, Brienne, and I am here with another special guest who has a powerful message to share with you. This episode is actually part 2 of that interview. And while we continue to talk about overcoming the need to perform, conversation becomes more focused around overcoming an eating disorder and some insight for parents to hopefully decrease the chances of an eating disorder appearing in their children's lives. Because we will be discussing such a sensitive topic, I do want to leave you with a trigger warning. If you are not in a place right now to hear about eating disorders, it's totally fine. I didn't edit this episode for a while because I actually wasn't in a place to hear about it either, so no judgment. Make sure you just click back over to my channel, and I think that you'll find lots of other content that you will find very valuable. You can also download my free digital planner and dedicate the time that you would have spent listening to this episode working on scheduling your self-care, filling out my journal prompts, or intentionally setting aside time to be kind to yourself. So without further ado, let's dive right back in where we left off.
It's that whole performance thing again and dissociation. It's the whole, really, it's just a coping technique. We all have them. That was my flavor.
The eating disorder was your flavor of coping technique?
It was, yeah. In the environment that I was raised, as I said, performing to the degree of perfection was truly the only way to receive, in my experience, breadcrumbs of positive reinforcement, positive affirmation, to feel loved, to feel enough. And to turn the volume down on a lot of the critical negative messages, which was motivation in the era. Like, that was how you motivated your child, was you just criticize them more, like, for how they should change, right? That's what we thought was like the thing. I'm very sensitive, and so I internalized a lot of the messages about how when my body was less than perfect and my clothing on my body was less than perfect, and what I should wear and shouldn't wear, and all of the things. And so I made up at 12, I asked my mom if she would buy me diet pills. And thankfully, she said no, but she didn't know how to be curious about that or dig further. And so what I did instead was, I was a very active babysitter. It was a booming business. And I would use my babysitting money and I would ride my bike to the mall on Saturdays and buy myself the diet pills anyway. So I started diet pills at 12. And that was right at the edge of my tween years, when my body really started to shift and change. And even though I was an athlete, there's a certain amount of biology that no one has control over, and so I gained weight and I didn't eat what I wanted anymore. And food was my friend. Like, food was my comfort. Food was my love, which again, we know, as a baby cries and they're fed, what we learn in our brains is that there is a comfort to eating food. And believe me, food manufacturers and marketing companies have got that part down pat. And so food was my reward. And then food was also my punishment. When I was not perfect, I would just starve myself. And so this whole yo-yo thing with food, and when I gained weight, the things I heard mentioned, or directly to me and indirectly, about my body got significantly worse. And so then I would just punish myself by not eating. And this went on for 14 years. It got worse because I was never perfect enough. I was never good enough, and I was never lovable enough. And that, and then whether it was boyfriends or sex or, whatever, it was like this unfillable hole. And so the punishment was starving myself. It was just this constant, it was a version of performing. It was just yet performing in another way and dissociating from my body, because my body became a thing. I hated my brain because it was klutzy and clumsy, and I would knock over my parents' friends' drinks because I'd get so excited that friends were coming over, and all ADHD. So I hated my brain because it didn't know how to control me and be compliant and perfect all the time. But then I could completely dissociate from my body because it also created situations where I was on the receiving end of a whole lot of negativity, and then it wasn't perfect at sports. And so I just voted that off the island. And so I just hated all of myself. And so I was either shoving all of those feelings down with food, or I was starving myself because I didn't deserve food. So it was a long process and a lot of therapy where I never really actually talked about food, but it was all about just being lovable and worthy, and not self-deprecating and self-hatred, and coping with feelings by drowning them in food.
Well, how did you heal your relationship with food? Do you remember when or how that started for you?
It was a process it was very slow as I continued in a decade of personal development and getting to know myself and actually love myself, although I was still very dissociated from my body, hating my body slightly less. And so beginning to realize that I could feed it and that it would perform better. And then, which I know is like a whole other thing, but I wish I could tell you it was one thing. It was consistent, relentlessly seeking freedom from the vices and mechanisms I knew that had held me hostage, that where I chose them because it was the best that I knew how. And I just never stopped seeking healing. And it was one step, one moment, one bite, one something at a time.
I'm curious how listeners can support somebody who loves somebody struggling with an eating disorder, both as a parent, especially
Mhm.
as a parent of girls,
Mm.
and also as an adult supporting a friend.
Right. Yeah. So the first thing would be to get them professional help. Now, that doesn't mean they're ready for it, unfortunately. Like an alcoholic might know they're an alcoholic, but they're not ready to stop drinking. Like, someone who's using food to cope might hate being stuck in this terrible dynamic, but they're not ready for help. But definitely getting professional help is no, first and foremost. As a parent of teen girls, it is absolutely critical what you are modeling. Because if you are modeling a version of performance in your body and self-hatred on your body such that you're always weighing yourself, you're dieting, you're restricting in some ways, you're using it. It is subtle, okay? It is subtle, but it is real. With self-deprecating talk, how do you talk about your body? How does your team hear you discuss your body and how you fit in your clothes? Is it that your body is wrong because it doesn't fit your clothes, or is it that your clothes are wrong because there's nothing wrong with your body? Then when you're working out, are you working out to feel good? Are you working out because you have to look good? Like these are very, very pervasive messages for a lot of women who still prescribe to it that don't realize it because your daughter is watching. And then it's also about how you address her, that you never, and this also goes for fathers of daughters, because men have been raised in a patriarchal society. And so many men struggle not to sexualize their daughters as they're developing. And I don't mean be prey. I mean, they're really weirded out and uncomfortable when they develop breasts and hips and begin to become voluptuous. And all of a sudden they remove all physical attention because it feels weird for them. Get over yourself. Get over yourself and go do the work, because you're sending the message that her body's not okay. And that's a big deal from a father to a daughter. For a mother to a daughter, are you addressing her as how she looks? You look great today, instead of you're super smart, you're talented, you're intelligent, you're kind, you're humble, you are well spoken, you are like, it's character traits, not what we look like. And this is overcoming generations of this. So again, like no shame to anybody listening. These are habitual. You might have grown up in this. So the way you address your daughter is key. That if you are dressing for how you look and confidence, you're normal. Because come on, name me one person that doesn't have a power suit. I don't care if it's your gym outfit and you just feel good in it and you feel confident and you're like, yeah, I can. I don't care if it's your Armani suit. I don't care. We all have a power suit. So if you are dressing for confidence because you feel good, then name it and claim it. Don't pretend. So that when your daughter is dressing in a way that you think is purely for attention, you can say, how do you feel in that? And she can be like, I feel confident. I feel good. And you can be like, good. Because only you know if you're dressing for confidence or you're dressing for attention. And there's neither really, I mean, I don't want to judge either one. It's just, we need to be careful how we're talking to our daughters, and that we're constantly in the school system telling our daughters that it's their problem how they dress, because men are not responsible for any of their actions or like whose vagina they fall into. So that's also a problem. But that with young girls, it's about being confident in your body. It's about feeling good in your brain and in your body. It's that we all look different. It's that we're not supposed to all look the same. We don't like so it's how you address and model yourself around her, and then also how you address her, particularly in the adolescent years when teenagers, their self-esteem drops up to 30% and they are wildly insecure. And so they will dress for attention when in that time of insecurity. And instead of always trying to convince them that they're okay, stop trying to, how do you feel when I'm always trying to tell you you're wrong and convince you? Yeah, well, we're probably not friends. To say to your daughter, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, and that, there's all this terrible bullying and everyone's talking about each other and being rude and crass and mean, and that you be the person who lets them know that yes, it's happening. Stop pretending. It is happening. It's true for them, and it can be painful and very scary. And none of it defines her value and worth in this world, because your love will never be conditional to the container she occupies.
That's beautiful. I grew up without a mom, and when she was
Mm.
around, there was a lot of comments about my body. So that's just really healing and beautiful to hear. And I have sons, so I am mindful, but I'm also very mindful that I am parenting a different experience in this world. I even
Yeah, in a
just
different generation, Yeah.
Absolutely. I had a thought the other day. I was looking at myself in the mirror and checking out a new skirt. I didn't catch myself until I saw my son doing it, but I had like sucked in a little bit, just not even realizing. And I looked in the back of the mirror, and there he was standing behind me, kind of like moving his belly in and out. And I was like, oh, oof, like that. I felt that. And
Mm.
I think about those moments and like, wow, I really need to step my game up in that department.
I have a lot of friends with daughters, and some of them have lived with me for a time. I have a lot of nieces. So I'm kind of like a mom to two sons, but I'm an aunt to many young girls. And we're not going to get it perfect, because the reality is we are still in a patriarchal, misogynistic global culture. And letting our teens understand that it's not them that's wrong or bad, it's the culture. And that we can be part of a voice in changing that, but it is never their responsibility to assimilate to a culture that was never right in the first place.
Raising change makers. How do you handle how others talk to children? Others making comments that are seemingly innocent but have a very large impact, like calling a young toddler girl chubby or making comments about her body or how much she's growing or not growing. How do you handle advocating for your child when it's other people who are saying these things?
Mm-hmm. That's when my inner teenager comes out. Yeah. Yeah. She's bold and she's brash, and she doesn't wait. Raising a son with autism and ADHD, autism spectrum, they're often very agitated and sometimes angry because the environment is never exactly how they want it to be. So it's like if they're agitated, and agitated grandchildren are just so much less fun and pleasing. He's being him. He's being who he is right now. He's being in his brain right now.
An experience.
And this is not about you. He's not here to please you. He's not here to make you feel good. He can barely make himself feel good. So we're not going to add to his role making you feel good. If you're uncomfortable around him, okay, but he doesn't need to change to make you feel comfortable. Those were hard times. Those were very hard times around family for years, with a very agitated child at a family function that was supposed to be like special and fun. And like the one grandchild like was unable to have fun at the drop of and command of everybody else. That was very challenging. So simply saying no, like he's being him. He's not here for you. He's here for him.
It's not here for you.
He's not here for you. Like again and again, like this is that whole performance thing that grandchildren are intended to please the grandparents. Like that's their job. No. No, it's not. As far as, parents making comment about body image and things like that, I step in immediately, unquestionably, right then and there. This little girl is not here to be someone's pinup. And I know that sounds brash when they're talking about a 2-year-old, but isn't that what we're talking about?
Her body.
Right. It's the same. I don't care if she's a pinup. She's not. Yes, that is what you're saying. You're saying that she is not your ideal, that you've been fed by a patriarchal, misogynistic society. No, see, she's growing. In fact, she's growing faster now than she ever will in her entire human lifetime. And so she's being her. And if your perception of her is bothersome, that may come from something that in you that is uncomfortable with your body. Your comment says more about your discomfort about your body than anything to do with her body.
Oh, I love that. I'm hoping people are taking notes on that one, because it's a beautiful learning experience for the other person, and maybe something that they could hopefully dive into and unpack if they are willing to.
Right. Like there was a whole thing where in my area just recently where there was a track meet and there was a young 9-year-old with a little pixie cut, like short, like Pat Benatar kind of hair, which I used to have when I was young as well. And she was doing the high jump, and there was a set of grandparents there who have since been charged and removed from a number of situations forever, this young girl was winning, and they came up and started yelling and screaming at her that she was trans and she needed to prove her birth, like at a 9-year-old. And so it's this whole, like, your fear that your grandchild isn't winning is not this other gorgeous talented child's problem. Right? Like your discomfort with, let's just say my daughter's wearing a spaghetti strap, God forbid, spaghetti strap little thing that young girls should dress appropriately. What I would say is, yeah, isn't it crazy how young girls have been made responsible for a boy's lack of impulse control and behavior and what they fall into? Yeah, we're not. I'm pretty straight up my friends, we used to look after each other's kids. And my friends' kids got treated exactly the way that my kids got treated at my house. And if they did something, my nieces and nephews and anything, I would say right then, I do not feel respected when you treat me that way. I do not appreciate the way that you are treating me. I feel unheard, and I don't find this funny. If you would like to experience control or manipulation, you may go and use your stuffed animals. And I would say that right in front of, I don't care, because if I'm not going to tell them the truth and model ownership of my experience, self-advocacy, boundaries, then who's going to? And I know many people in my generation were raised to believe that, especially for women, that's rude. No, that's my responsibility.
Which would you rather have, being rude or having your child potentially be hurt? And words hurt, and they last and they stick. They're like seeds that are planted in your brain, and they're watered with each reinforcing belief, magazine cover, comment.
Yeah. And I can't protect my child from everything. I can't. Things are going, especially with the online world now, with social media. I can and I will stand for my own values, let alone, yes, it's advocating for my child, but ultimately what I'm doing is taking a stand for my values. What just happened here has crossed my values, and it happens to involve me because that's my child. So I can't protect, my child is going to hear cruel things. They're going to hear mean things said to them. And I will be that safe person that they can bring that to. And I will listen and I will empathize and be in that pain and not tell them they're overreacting or being too sensitive or being dramatic or looking for attention, or they just heard it wrong, or it must be them, which is what a lot of young girls are told. It must be how you perceive the situation, because the victim is always made to be responsible, if you're female. Instead, to say, what might you say? And I've empowered my children to say, that's not okay. Your pain is not my problem. When children used to use profanity toward my children, what I taught my kids is, like, these kids, they're only using that language because they're not smart enough to know the other words to say. They haven't learned other vocabulary, and they want to feel powerful and influence and strong, which is normal for children and teenagers to want to feel influential. That is how bullying comes about. It's about teaching them that other people's choices does not define them. Other people's thinking does not impact their character or their worth, and that it will sting and it will hurt. And you can still say, no, I do not accept that. I will not receive that.
Teaching young girls that alone is life-changing. I mean, I wish I had known that vocabulary or just that sentence to be able to say in so many moments. And it's amazing that you're out there sharing that and giving people the language and the tools that they need to advocate for themselves and for their children. Like, that's just going to continue to heal generational traumas and facilitate generational healing. I think that's really, really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Is there anything for anybody, the little you who is listening, who has found this podcast episode or two? I think it's going to be broken up into two. If they have found you, what words of wisdom do you want to leave them with, or encouragement?
They have a choice. You have a choice. You do not need to stay in a cyclical pattern of parenting that doesn't feel right for you or isn't working for your child just because it's what you were taught or the work or other people are telling you. There is another way, and you have the right to pursue that way and advocate for your child in that way. and you don't have to do it alone. You are not failing because you cannot fail at something there's no training for. So you're not failing. The awareness of, just wanting something different, dang, that makes you courageous. You're welcome in my world anytime. I think we need more people who are courageous and willing to stand up against the system and indoctrination and say, no, I don't like that. It doesn't work for me. It might work for you and that's fine, but it doesn't work for me. And I'm going to go seek different. Like, I have so much respect for those people. And if your inner child is, you notice you're in personal cycles of self-harm, coping, not coping. There is healing for that too. And I think Glennon Doyle says it the best. She says, first the pain and then the rising. And you don't have to do that alone either. There's plenty of proven healing methods. And my framework is not only about small print, healing yourself in the process of becoming the parent that you want to be.
That's so important. To be the parent that you want to be, you need to be regulated, and filling your own cup is what we always hear, but it's so true.
Right. It's just really tough when we were never taught that. Like, it becomes this elusive thing we want, but because our brains are wired to repeat what we know, we have no idea how to get there. And that doesn't make us not intelligent or not caring and not loving or not. It just makes us normal. So it takes the work. And I will walk with you every step of the way. Promise.
I love that. I will have all of your contact info in the description for them to find you. And I am so grateful that you have spent all of this time with me. I am just better off knowing you. And I hope that we stay in touch. I know I'll have you on for future projects as well. But thank you for sharing your time and your energy and your space, your stories. Those are very vulnerable.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, for doing what you do, for sharing the stories, for sharing the insight and the knowledge that I think needs a bigger platform. And because of you, it's getting that. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm really, really grateful for that. I needed that little boost. I'm like coming back from a social media detox. It was very nice and wonderful, but it's like I could just stay here in my little hole and never come back.
Yes, social media can be quite a bear.
If you're interested in hearing more about overcoming eating disorders, improving your body image, or anything else, then I want to hear from you. You can ask your own questions, suggest a topic for a future episode, or even apply to be a speaker yourself by clicking the link below. You can find Aly on Instagram at Aly Pain or directly on her website at alypain.com. And all of that information will be linked in the episode description for you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. It's always an honor to spend this time with you. I hope to hear from you, and I hope to see you in the next episode. I'll see you again soon.